As the world marked Valentine's Day on Wednesday, it was not all fun for a section of Kenyan women as they mourned recent killings of girls in the country. In a protest, they christened Dark Valentine. They called on the government to fulfill the demands they made in a petition on how to tame femicide. One of the demands in the petition submitted to Parliament was the establishment of sexual and gender-based violence centers across the country to serve as homes for the victims of gender-based violence.
On a traditional day marked to celebrate love, women activists instead held a vigil to remember the victims of femicide by lighting candles, holding red roses and chanting the names of those killed. At least 16 women have been killed since the beginning of 2024.
People with disabilities are most vulnerable because they face the double challenge as the other people who have no disabilities, and most of the times their cases are not reported and their issues are not being considered in the media.
Government yetu imetulia sana, government ambayo sisi wenyewe wanawake tunajua kwamba inafaa kutuprotect na kwamba sisi tuko na right ya kuishi.
The rising wave of gender-based violence prompted formation of the End Femicide Kenya movement, which consists of over 1,000 organizations and individuals nationally to demand swift and effective action from the Kenyan government.
We're not only trying to make awareness on this issue, but we're also trying to put the steps legally to see how we can be able to have this thing come out strongly to the public, to be condemned publicly, and not only to be condemned, but to also be taken up in account of law, that this thing is actually a crisis for the country.
And unfortunately, it's a narrative that is being driven in the community. When something is not categorically condemned, it is quietly enabled. So we're finding that for many years we've struggled with cases of femicide and they're rising.
The vigils coincide with the opening of Parliament this week, where the movement organizers pushed for their petition to be debated.
What happened to our security forces? Yes, I know people will start saying the women, but honestly, this is love. Nobody is pushing the other. Why would you do that? So for me, Mr. Speaker, the most worrying thing is that we must go back to the judiciary and request the judiciary, Mr. Speaker, that if we have a case of someone who has raped, someone who has murdered, honestly, you don't need to give a bail to this person.
Citizens have questioned Parliament and asked, where have you been? But I want to state that the law is very clear. The law is very clear. Nobody is above the law, especially when it comes to matters of killings. And so I narrow it to the security forces. Security forces who seem not to have handled these issues fairly.
They, however, called for civic education on gender-based violence and rapid response by the police and judiciary in such cases.
To ensure a world where everyone can live without fear regardless of gender, activists now say addressing femicide requires cultural, education and legislation change. Reporting for KBC Channel 1, I'm Alvin Kaunda.